Hi, listeners. In this episode, my guest shares a bit about her personal life experience. And in that, she refers to some childhood trauma. And this may or may not be a trigger for some of you, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. Thanks. Hope you enjoy the episode. It's a great one. How many of us as children had dreams of what we'd like to be, what our work might be when we grow up? Some of us knew quite early that we'd like to be doctors, nurses, firefighters, police officers, teachers, park rangers, pilots, chefs, builders. Maybe some of us were involved in family businesses and imagined continuing that legacy. The list of options is vast, but few of us perhaps imagined that our life's work and ambition was to spread positive messages for children around the world. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, our podcast featuring nonprofits and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Dr. Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. We hope you'll love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. Please pass along any valuable information you hear today to others, and send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at lwitkoff@gmail.com. That's 2 T's and 2 F's. It's not often that I get to meet a serial do-gooder. Now, there are a few negative stereotypes of a do-gooder. After researching some, I am rejecting them all. Here are a few I found. The goody two-shoes who wants to make the rest of us look bad. The pleaser who just can't say no. The martyr, the one who gives their lunch away and doesn't eat themselves and says they're not hungry. The moralist who believes they are superior to others. Let me suggest another definition. One who believes that any one thing, no matter how small, contributes to the greater good for all. And this do-gooder knows that doing good is a collective effort. No one does good alone, but builds the momentum of doing good through leadership, a motivating spirit, and most importantly, holds the deep belief that together we can make a difference. I invite you to meet my guest today, Georgia Van Cuylenburg, Australian-born, Los Angeles resident, serial do-gooder, who may talk about any number of projects in which she is currently spearheading or involved, and each has the mission to support others. I will introduce one in particular, Arts Bridging the Gap, that supports the development of children and communities through a social justice lens by uplifting the voices, experiences, and self-expression of youth from under-resourced communities through immersive arts programs. They aim to cultivate the skills, mindsets, and connections that will allow youth to be their best and fullest selves as individuals and as members of diverse, thriving communities. They have done some amazing projects, including 67 murals throughout Los Angeles, urban farming at schools, as well as teaching girls technical skills to build virtual reality content. The list for Georgia is vast. I'm hoping she shares as much as she wants to during this podcast. We have the farm at LA Mission, Hearts for Community Action in Uganda. So it's not just locally, it's globally. Women's Community Leadership Program, Pops the Club, a program we actually interviewed for this podcast. So if you haven't heard it, please listen. Serve Needy, Children's Alopecia Project, and National Alopecia Areata Foundation. I may have mispronounced that, so Georgia's going to fix that in a moment. A podcaster in her own right, Georgia hosts the Laugh Factory Nerd World, interviewing comedians and other successful folks who were bullied or ostracized as kids for being nerdy or different. I just love that. Having a kid who's on the spectrum, who's incredibly successful in his own right. So I absolutely love that podcast name and the premise. And she developed this idea with Jamie Masada. There are so many more that I could name, but I really want to get to introducing Georgia. So let's get started. Welcome, Georgia. And where do you want to begin? You have so many interests and so much passion. I want to hand it over to you, and you tell me where you want to start and where you want to take this conversation.
Thank you so much, Laura. What an introduction. I have to tell you the part that got me the most, which maybe that's a good place for us to start, is when you said that piece about that every little thing that we do makes a difference. Mm-hmm. That got me a little choked up because that is so deeply rooted in me as both my shadow and my light, because the desire and the need and the belief to make sure that every one of my choices and everything I do and every interaction I have with a human being is like every moment makes a difference. And we sometimes forget that. I think we think that even in our private moments, it doesn't make a difference. But the way that we treat ourselves makes a difference. The way that we communicate with others and self, what we prioritize in our day. These are the things, like if we allow ourselves to see life through that lens, we really have to ask ourselves big questions every day of, am I doing what is best for the world today? Which means you as well. Like, I'm part of this world. I'm an important part to me because I'm the body that I live through. But I still need to make sure and also be compassionate with myself when I don't make the right choice. Because otherwise I won't come back and make another choice tomorrow that's better. But I really appreciated you saying that, because if all of us just lived through the lens of, is this a good choice for the world? We wouldn't need a lot of the things that we're needing.
Yeah. You have such a beautiful philosophy. And I read something recently where someone was commenting on you, and not only your level of energy, which is boundless, right? It's totally boundless, but your infectious enthusiasm and your beautiful smile, all of which I get to experience. My listeners hopefully can through the mic, but you truly embody that philosophy. And my guess is you did that a lot as a child, and you may have witnessed or experienced the inequity that exists. And so your message of wanting to bring that compassion and kindness and warmth to others, as you pointed out, starts internally, starts with us. And then you build with one moment at a time. And sometimes it can be huge and get big, like some of the projects you've been involved in. And some of it is just from moment to moment. But I love your concept of waking up. And this is sort of my dedication moment in the podcast. Wake up every morning asking yourself the question, what can I do for myself and be compassionate for myself? And what can I do for others? And I agree with you. The world would be a different place if we could only all do that.
You're speaking to my heart. For many years, that was something that I would say a lot when people would ask me, why do you do this stuff? I say, because every day the first question that comes to my mind is, what can I do for others today? I think it's very sad that we've somehow put the sense of service and volunteerism and giving in a place of duty and obligation and I must, as opposed to, oh my gosh, how lucky am I that I get to do this because of the feels that you get, the connection. A speech I gave recently just came to a point of saying, I wish we could rework the word volunteerism into being in community, because that's what it is. You know, when you go and give your time or your energy or something to be with another group of folks who don't have the certain genius that you have. Maybe your special genius is, I don't know, engineering, and you go and give your time to a farm. They have the strength. They have the space. This is not a zero-sum game ever. This is an equal game when come together. When I work with folks who are living in under-resourced communities, I am so gifted every time by their perspective, their sense of family, their sense of resilience, their stories. I leave feeling so selfish. I'm like, oh my God, I got so much from this. I hope I gave them a quarter of what they gave me. But there's so many folks out there that think that they're going to volunteer and they're the one giving the gift. And not that there's anything wrong with that, because yes, by being you give a gift to the world. 100%. When you turn up and you smile at a person, that's a gift. I'm not saying it's not. But this isn't about who gives anything. This is about I chose today to be in this place where somebody else brought their magic and I brought mine. And together we created an important moment of change or an important moment of connection and love. And it's not anybody getting more or less. And that's why I never say give back. I'm like, what are you giving back to? Like, what is the back part? And even giving Beautiful. Is a funny one as well. Like it gets, and I don't like to be too heavy on the semantics, but I think words definitely matter. My childhood absolutely informed the choices I make, the fact that we're sitting here, the way I see the world. Obviously, everybody's childhood does. That's how life works. I grew up in a very comfortable world. We were definitely the less wealthy amongst the very wealthy. Not that makes a difference, because in my opinion, I was born already with a handover of now you give to the world. I believe that the minute I was born into the world that I was born into, my job and my role in life was to acknowledge that for whatever I experience from here on out, I will always have been given more at a start than so many people in the world. Because I was in this closeted world of Melbourne, Australia. My parents are terrified of the world in so many ways. So I really wasn't exposed to a lot of anything risky, anything dangerous. I wasn't from some family that went on mission, like they're not religious. Like it couldn't be a more, this is our safe world that you should live in, and never to the point where that was a huge issue of contention with me and my parents all through. Like I literally said to them, I love you too much to live in the same country as you because I can't stay safe. My mother and I have such very different personalities. She had a very contentious relationship with her father. She had so much fear in her. She really has changed so much, and it's beautiful to see. And we're very self-aware and have this beautiful relationship that just really transformed this year of full honesty and full disclosure around our, epigenetic past of where her mother did and what her father, all that stuff. So I can say this now without being like, gosh, I hope mum agrees on this. There was a lot of mismatching of who I was and how she parented. And both of my parents, my dad's very quiet, my mom was very fear-based. And I had an older brother that was very fear-based as well and was very confused by life because I was the confident one and he wasn't. The irony being he's now a celebrity and very confident. He was driven by my story as well to do what he does. So at 2.5, I was molested by a man in the front yard of my grandpa's house, the same person that had this contentious relationship with my mother, a very angry man. And a very afraid man. I don't believe in anger. So he was a very sad, afraid man that was manifesting as anger in him. I believe in it. I don't think it's the cause of anything. It's a symptom of pain. I didn't know this until a year ago, but my older brother was there. And in that moment, a belief that my brother, I couldn't rely on my brother. And in that moment, I took myself into the pantry, which caused endless years of eating issues, which I never unwinded until recently. And I hid in my grandparents' pantry. And I realized that my mom and my grandpa were too angry through their pain and hurt for me to tell them this. That it was not safe, that I needed to take this on, and I needed to protect every child in the world from this confusing pain that I had caused because I was happy and bubbly and friendly to a man in a front yard. So I had instantly built a belief system for myself of you are not safe unless you do it yourself and you protect yourself, that nobody else can handle what you know, and you need to protect everybody from this.
And this is all at age 2.5, like the unbelievable, horrific.
I can still see the pantry. I can still smell it. From then on, I became an introvert, because what happens in the brain is when a child is molested or when a child has a traumatic event, dopamine flows a certain way as an extrovert and a certain way as an introvert. And I believe, from everything I understand about neurobiology now, that the trauma of the event short-circuited the dopamine flow and switched me to being an introvert. So on top of that, I started living a life wanting to be alone and needing my own time and needing processing time because of the empathy that I was feeling. Because introverts and extroverts are misunderstood. It's purely where do you get your energy source.
Right, exactly.
So I went from being somebody that got my energy source from other human beings to being from myself. But I was so afraid of myself because of what I knew, that being alone was very scary for me because I didn't want to be alone with the reality of what had happened. And this is something I offer to anyone listening who's gone through trauma, which is pretty much all of us. The self-loathing and the shame we put on ourselves for how we've coped with our trauma. If I could wish anything for the world, it would be to remove that shame and self-loathing.
Yeah, I agree. Couldn't agree more.
We all did this because what special, clever, wise bodies you were to create a coping and survival mechanism in that moment. If you're being molested by somebody who turns up to your house every day, disassociate to save yourself by all means. Be able to cut off from the pain, because how would you live if your parents are doing things to you that are too hard to understand? Of course you choose to blame yourself, because to think that your safety and your place of nourishment and protection from the world is still good, because if you saw them as bad, your whole world crumbles around you. So I won't go off on a tangent, but I just really wish that people could forgive themselves for the choices they made to survive.
Right, because it's not about it ends up being blaming the victim in that situation. And you really were very aware that your parents could not be a place of safety for a whole host of reasons.
And if anything, what a special, clever, magical human being you were to take on your own protection and make the physical, biological choices that you needed to make in that moment to survive.
Absolutely.
Like, so if anything, go you. Now let's help you unwind it. By 4 and a half, when I did my first musical production and I discovered that people laughed at me and smiled and I had this something, I thought, I'm going to do this. Because I made them happy. I remember the front row in this thing of they'd forgotten their pain and they'd forgotten they were in a moment of joy. And it was what I was doing as a little skeleton that was making them think that. And so at 4 and a half, I was like, that's it. I'm going to use entertainment and performing. And that's how I'm going to spread this positive, happy, and let everybody be free of their pain. Through elementary school, there was a lot of confusion. Of course, nobody knew about the sexual trauma, and I didn't. I chose to black it out. And by the way, for anyone that's listening is like, does that really happen? I was the person that for years was like, that whole like regressive memory thing, I don't believe it for a second. So the fact that it happened to me, now I have to be like, okay, because there's been so many bizarre, unexplainable physical things. And now we've also done some like news tracking of that man, and this person exists, and the fact that my brother now says he was it happened, but I did not remember it until 2008. All of that to be said, I grew up in a world that was comfortable and cushy and full of laughter and happiness, and an incredible family, 2 brothers that are just the greatest human beings. I love them to pieces and back and more, and parents that really were doing their best. And I was miserable, and I was confused, and I was lost, and I was loathing of myself because I was trying to be the extrovert that I no longer was. And I was a high achiever and a control person. A lot of that was truly who I was, but it was through a lens of need, as opposed to desire, like love and happiness.
Well, it was through safety. Think about the only way you could feel safe was to control the environment in which you were in, because you learned that very early on. So this is all to say there's an absolute reason that you needed to be in control, because anyone else in control was way too risky.
100%. And what was building in me, when we get back to, like I said, this was not an easy question to answer, quickly. When we get back to why these define who we were, through all of this, I was building this understanding of looking at a world that could do anything, like the money and the comfort and the access to arts and the access to expression. If I didn't have that, who would I have? I would have been a mess. I could have been one of the people that I now work with who are experiencing homelessness so easy. I could have been one of the young people that are completely shut down, never use their words, But because I had this constant left and right brain integration happening through my expression and the access I got to opportunities, I got to heal even though I didn't know I was healing. But by the time I was 11, I had the starts of anorexia, and I had anorexia all through high school and into my 20s because my body was so foreign to me and it was disassociated and I was so shamed about it. And so all of this stuff was going on, and underneath it was this belief and knowledge that performing was what I was here to do, that entertaining. And at 12, I decided that I was going to move to Hollywood to use entertainment to spread positive messages through kids, as you mentioned in the introduction. But to add into that, and this is literally, Laura, only something I started to remove from my cells and my mitochondria last Thursday, is the understanding that all of this noise that I created, as beautiful as it is, and as important as all of these organizations I have, and how much I love them, and how I've reversed the plan. The plan was to get famous and then do these. I reversed the plan because I wasn't famous. So I was like, I better well do the work. I don't want to just be somebody that's talking about it. So I've done it in reverse. But all of that happened because somewhere within that pain and the hurt, around about third grade, I realized how very good I was at it, at entertaining. I realized that I was profoundly good, and that wasn't acceptable, because that's very confronting for people around you. For other kids, I can name them. I remember the bullying. I remember the uncomfortability of parents who, when they said, gosh, George is very good at this, it wasn't a good thing. It was like, look at Georgia with her big mouth open. I could show you a picture. I think I literally decided to get it printed off from 8x10. I'll show you it sometime, of me singing my heart out with the biggest mouth. And I remember that moment, and I cried last Thursday when I was thinking about how happy I was, and it's coming up now. That was the greatest moment of my life to date, because I was doing the thing I was here to do. When I say that I'm profoundly good at it, a week ago I couldn't have said that, because I would have been, God, I'm so up myself. Like, what a ego. But everybody has that thing. Everybody has the thing that makes them cry for joy. And that was mine. That's all.
And in some way, George, I have to say, I just think your story is incredible and horrible what happened to you at a very young age. And yet you utilized it in the most positive way possible by knowing what you don't want to have to happen to other people, particularly the shame, the recognition of your own bubble or privilege. And at the same time, I think you mentioned this, and I want to highlight it. The thing that you were so profoundly good at and deeply love, there was this exterior noise that kept you from truly blossoming into that space, or that's what I'm hearing.
It has. I am now literally, like I said, I mean, I've been unwinding it for the last few years, but I stepped out of entertainment. When I lost my hair, I think I used that almost as like an excuse, but I also wasn't being my best. I wasn't being good at it, because it was coming with a desperation and a knowing that I wasn't as good as I could be, which created, cognitive dissonance in every moment. And if you know anything about brains, cognitive dissonance does not allow all the neural pathways to fire to the places that we need them to fire to do the work we need to do.
Well, there's this internal conflict that you're fighting all the time. My listeners don't know about the alopecia, and you can talk about that when you want to, but that was another factor that you had to combat.
Yeah, I mean, I was wearing wigs because I'd lost all my hair.
How old were you when that started?
I lost all my hair when I was 20, and I'd just been here for a little bit, and I didn't have doctors or anything, so I had to once again make it work. And the message of, I have to do this myself and control it. And I made a movie about it, and the movie was very successful, and that's wonderful and so great and important. I still travel and speak to all the kids. But when I speak to kids and when I speak to people about alopecia now, it's really not about the hair. It's because the hair loss is the biggest gift you could ask for. To have a situation where you have to remove a thing that so many of us put sense of value into allows you to question so many other things we put value into. Because when I walk into a room with a blonde wig on, which I'm not anymore, which is an incredible gift, but when I have, and somebody chooses to talk to me or value me because of that, that's the same as if they saw me as beautiful because I have a bracelet on. Like, it's an accessory that I bought and could take off and you could wear Like I've literally in Beverly Hills, like a woman at a really fancy steakhouse once was like, oh my God, I love your hair so much. And I turned to her, and I was on a date and she was on a date, and I said, it's not mine. You can have it if you want. So to tie it back to all of this, how dare I not put all of my energy into making sure that others who did not get the gift I got of the parenting and the environment, how dare I not do this every day? Because I'm done. The gifts that I needed were done at birth. So I need to live every day being my true self, because when I talk about this work, the reason I started Arts Bridging the Gap was because I was surrounded as a volunteer every day with young people who lived in under-resourced communities, who did not have voice, who were afraid to speak up, who believed from their environment that the answer would always be no, and who did not have the art, the dancing, it started because of dancing, because of a little boy who I was tutoring. And when I put him into a dance class, his grades went from first grade to third grade level back to the level he was in within 3 months. And all he got to experience was dance because he was good at it. And nothing else had changed, but being good at dance allowed him to take risks and make mistakes in other places.
Absolutely. It's about self-esteem. And once you start to build that confidence in an area, it does translate into almost every other area. It doesn't mean you're going to be a mathematician, but it means that you belong. You're part of it, right? And you get to contribute in whatever way you can. And you're going to approach that learning in a new way, not in a one down position, but in an equitable position. And that's what you're trying to do.
I love research. I love the brain. I love understanding socio-emotional connections. And it became clear to me instantly that arts was the most important thing that we could bring our young people who are experiencing trauma, as for my personal story, but also in all of the other incredible examples of people who have done this work and do it better, do it differently. They had proven this. You said it yourself that I've used these things to create what I do now, but in a good way. But I believe, and I'm not a religious person, I'm a spiritual person, but I do believe I was given everything very clearly to show me what I needed to know and experience, because I went through trauma in a world that should not have happened. So that when I sit with a young person who's got trauma, I know viscerally what they're feeling. But I also grew up in a world where I saw what was possible with money, and I was given the confidence to say what I wanted or ask questions. And my mom is really somebody that questions the world. And so it was built into me to ask the bigger questions. But then I also have a father that was from Sri Lanka, wasn't allowed into Australia during the White Australia policy. But it was never talked about. But then also I grew up watching what people were spending their money on and thinking, this doesn't seem quite right. I moved to America having never seen homelessness, having never seen true poverty, having never understood what I knew viscerally, that there was more to this. And so by the time I moved to Los Angeles, and for many people, there are parts of LA that are, I won't say as bad, because now I spent so much time in Uganda and Ethiopia and India. It is not as bad, but it is not far off. I had the information. What I don't have, Laura, is the deep, deep experience. And I'm very, very aware of that. And I think it's so important for me to check myself if I ever come across as being the experiential knowledge of what it is to be somebody of color living in Los Angeles. Right. I absolutely know the stories. I love my people, my families. I love them, and I want their world to feel different. But I can never know what it's like to grow up through the trauma of that. But what I can do is have a little bit of understanding, enough to step into that boardroom and to step into that fancy meeting that because of the way I look, I get allowed in. And I think somebody once said to me something about, they were like, you just get into the rooms because of the way you look. And I said, well, that's really nice. But I'll tell you, as a female, it's a heck of a lot harder to stay in that room. It's really easy to get in, but you're fighting an uphill battle. And you know what? If I get into that room and I get to speak for my communities, you better shut the door, because I'm not leaving.
But you have an incredible degree of empathy. So I believe that you don't have to come from a place that is exactly like the folks with whom you're engaging in trying to provide support and help in order to create a more equitable environment. And I also want to comment on, the developing countries that you mentioned, places in India and Uganda and certain parts of Africa, their level of poverty, it's not comparable. But for a country like the United States that is so wealthy and has so much to offer, there is absolutely no logical reason why people are living in poverty-ridden environments and situations. And we are not creating a society that supports wellness, both academically, socially, emotionally, that would build our society from a strength perspective. So you are bold, and there's no shame in that. And the fact that you are blonde and white, maybe the reason the door gets opened, I don't feel good about that reason for anybody. There is bias all around us, whether someone sees your name and makes a bias about that, or sees how you look and makes a bias for or against, or whatever the bias is, or as a female. We all experience that in one form or another, some much worse than others. But the fact that you can use that in a bold way to make a difference says everything.
I did some research a couple of years ago, and at that point, the number, I'm sure it's changed now, especially with COVID. It's hard to know what any of the numbers of aid and things really mean. But at that point, it was $81 a year. So if everybody in America gave $81 to a fund, we could completely create an equitable living situation for anyone in a developing world. I think it's an important message for us to hear, but I also really want, because if we don't talk about this from a place of empathy, we'll never change it. And I think a lot of people come at this with like, what's wrong with these wealthy people? For people that don't give, I feel sorry for them in so many levels, but it also shows me not that they're a bad person, but how deep their fear goes and how traumatized they are. Right. Money is a form of control that people who have it have realized they can use to keep themselves safe and to keep the world around them looking the way they've known it to look. And when you've been traumatized or when you've had issues growing up, you need the world to stay the same so that if you're on top, and I think we're seeing this a lot with the whole like white male thing right now, to stay in a place where things are good, I need to control my environment. And I know this being from my story, you need to keep it all controlled. And if I give you money and take out money and say power, if I give you person who looks different to me power, does that mean I don't have it? Are you going to come and get me? Because deep down, it's my feeling, deep down in people who are very wealthy that don't give, there is a deep shame and guilt and fear of all the choices that they've made, that they know are not good choices, that they know are selfish choices. And there's this kind of deep voice of God being like, you better look out because karma's a thing. And so I won't give my power over, whether it's $10 or $20. I won't give my power over because my life might be destroyed. I can't help but feel sorry for them and also empathize that nobody wants to destroy their life. I can't tell them they're wrong, that they feel that way. I could tell them that they're wrong, that giving $50 to a person that looks different to them isn't going to remove any power, and in fact will feel amazing, but I can't deny that they feel that way.
What folks sometimes don't understand is when you have a more educated and more socially conscious and a more giving society, everybody wins.
Like I even used to say this, I'd be like, I wish that I could spend the time and the effort giving the therapy and love to those older men that aren't donating money, but I've tried that. I've dated them. It doesn't work. They're too far gone. I need to focus on the kids.
Focus on the kids. So you have so many kind of fingers in the different pies, right? And so share with me a little bit about Arts Bridging the Gap, because you've done 67 murals across LA. You work with these kids But this particular organization is really interesting because it really does capitalize on the two things you love the most, sort of the arts component of it and the idea of building self-worth.
And it is a very special organization to me. Obviously, I shared a little bit of the origin story, where it came from. But we have a number of programs. The one that has got the most publicity is our street art initiative, which is the murals. We also are teaching, as we are redefining what Girls Make VR is going to be called, because obviously there are many young people that don't represent as girls anymore in their world. So we're working with the young people in the class to choose a new name, which is very funny. Their suggestions are hilarious.
And is this going on in an after-school program or part of, tell me how that works?
What's currently called Girls Make VR, which is the one you mentioned with VR, that goes in a school day for sixth graders at Gala in Los Angeles. We have a number of the programs. Arts Plus Wellness is an extension of what we experienced during COVID and our direct response to try and help healing happen in schools. So we're doing murals there, we're doing farming, we're going to be doing dance and theater and choirs. And I'm so excited because I'm getting back to my art. So I threw myself into the mural program, not thinking I would ever. I failed ninth grade art, visual art. I never thought that this was going to be a thing. That I did. I was just going to hire artists, and I've now, I think, 7 of the murals I ended up having to design purely out of a need, which I'm sure Miss Cox, my ninth grade art teacher, would just die from hilarity if she knew. All of our programs, most importantly, are based on an empathy curriculum. So it's a curriculum that I've built over the last 6 years of us being an organization. From my understanding, I taught improv to kids before I started ABG. I have done improv. I'm a Second City graduate improviser. And it was a lot of what games can we create and activities can we create to help shift the neural pathways, rewire them to see each other different. So we use this empathy curriculum. In the case of the murals, we run classes where the young people get to do all the games and experience self-expression and experience all sorts of bizarre things, whether it's trust and how that works in the brain, whether it's feelings and how that works in their brain and body. And then in the second half of the class, we start talking about a mural that they're going to create. And we encourage, over 6 to 8 weeks, we encourage them to put all their ideas and their visions and thoughts together. And then we either have a professional artist there with them. We're shifting as of this week to actually try and employ, so to speak, through gift cards, the students in the class to actually design the murals themselves. We really want to give those opportunities to young people and have mentors for them. But we needed to have professional artists to get started because we needed to prove our worth.
Is this program, is it in just one school? Can you grow it? Or tell me, because it just sounds wonderful.
It's an interesting thing. We're actually going to be scaling down because it's so expensive for us and moving into other areas. We'll always do it, but it's been the main focus and it's very expensive to do it. So we're trying to be smarter with our time and energy. It also kills me. And like if we did 2 murals last month and I've just been at my wit's end. And so I'm hiring people, and finally, because I'm just a volunteer, I'm excited to, in the next few years, hire people of color to step into roles. And I've got an incredible woman, Ariella, who's our new program manager. So we're starting to build the infrastructure so that I can step back and focus back now that I'm ready to be the performer that I'd avoided being. And spread the word of arts, bridging the gap through that. To answer your question, we have done them all over LA. We are in consistently Los Angeles High School, Fairfax High School, Maywood High School now. We are working at Arts in Action in East LA. We have worked consistently with the Police Activities League kids in Hollywood. We've done a lot of work at Holmes Avenue Elementary School in South LA. My goal was to do 10 murals in each of the 15 council districts, so it was completely equitably spread, defined by that. And we also do it in the county a bit now. We've sort of done it wherever the opportunity, wherever there was a partner that needed, wanted, and valued this, I would go there because purely in needs, I don't have time to convince somebody. I don't have time to work against the challenges of an administration somewhere that doesn't believe in this. So we just go where we get partners that go, we get it, and we're willing to go that extra step because we do. We're there at 10 o'clock at night doing the outline the night before. And it's not that I expect somebody to be there then too, but we're gonna really push ourselves further than it's comfortable, and it doesn't feel good when you're working with a partner that just doesn't want to make that possible for the young people, because that's the bottom line. We're there because of the young people, and it's frightening how often school administration doesn't seem to have the same focus.
Well, their focus is so much on other things, with things like No Child Left Behind. They're focusing on the tests that they have to pass instead of the experience that actually would help some child pass the test. So I've seen that, in other states as well, and it's sad.
The majority of the murals, I didn't say the majority, I'd say more than half of the murals are not at schools. They are in public places, very public places like Hollywood and Highland or Sunset Boulevard, or I think we've got 4 now on Sunset Boulevard. The really important part of that and why I chose murals is, once again, bringing in my neuroscience geeky person. The experience of awe and reverence in the brain is one of the most powerful transformational emotions that and cognitive changes that you could offer a human being. We know that when there's a mural in an area, it reduces the crime rate by about 18%. And what happens for people that want to quantify that is when someone experiences awe and reverence, whether it's art or nature, what happens in the brain is this magical trick of they feel bigger and smaller at the same time. Like, there's something that happens where people quantify it as, I feel like I can do more in the world, but I also am a small piece in a beautiful picture. It does attract the trauma as well, because when you put that art in a place, when we talk about kids, the most important thing for a child's brain development is uninterrupted imagination time, not early study. There's that incredible book about play that came out a couple of years ago that proved that all these parents that are putting their kids into early learning are actually doing them a disservice, because the uninterrupted imagination time. And when you put a mural near where a child is, it gives them unrestricted imagination focus time to give their brain a break from all of the confusing messages and confusing, demands from social media. It's not the same. That even looking at a piece of art on their phone isn't the same as looking at a mural that captures their breath and makes them rewire their focus time.
Because you're really creating a connection between yourself and another human being. And so bridging and creating that connection allows a moment of humanness.
I think it's Barbara Fredrickson, I think she wrote this book, Love 2.0, says a micro moment of positive resonance. Yeah. And that is how she defines love.
And I also just want to comment on in terms of children, and so the opportunity to free your mind up and be in a space where you get to see something outside, you get to look at this beautiful mural, and you get to use a piece of your imagination, whether you imagine yourself inside the mural, walking by it, connected to it, having imagined who painted it. I mean, the whole thing is so incredible.
Because we paint them with the kids and their families. We don't paint them by ourselves. The children come out and paint, and that looks so messy and so hysterical. Every single time I do one of these, the people organizing that haven't done this before look at me like I'm in just off the world. Like, they're like, it's a mess. It's everywhere. The kids are painting everywhere. They're painting themselves. And I'm like, it's okay.
I just love it. So you're stepping back a little bit, and you're creating the infrastructure so it will continue, which is a beautiful thing. And my guess is with other organizations you've done similar things where you've started something, you have this amazing idea, you're so full of energy, and then you step back. What's in your future? You're going back to sort of your core of making people happy and entertainment as a platform in a way to continue being a do-gooder. Really, that's kind of your MO. So share with me a little bit about that, and then I'm going to ask you my quick and gutsies.
Yeah, as you said, I've stepped back a little bit so Women's Community Leadership Program in Ethiopia, I've handed back to the Ethiopian community, and I'm just their ambassador now. Hearts for Community Action, I look forward to doing a similar thing when they're in a stable place in Uganda. Serve Needy in India, I am very much just an ambassador. Gotham has that well and truly locked and loaded, but I've made a documentary VR film that we're in post-production for, and they are family to me and always will be. For Arts Bridging the Gap, yes, my plan is to be the chairman in a couple of years and just be in that position. I'm actually really excited. We're exploring a new form of leadership called compassionate leadership, where I actually want to explore having 3 leaders in the organization, which would be a program leader, an administration leader, and the founding leader, and everybody has an equal voice and brings equal value. And then, of course, there's my farm on Skid Row and the work I do with LA Mission, all of that stuff. Yes, very much. I want to know the story and have lived the story, and now just tell the story when I get the opportunity, because for a very long time, I've spent my hours telling young people to be their best self and follow their dreams and pursue their dreams. And what happened in 2019 in September, when I had a bit of a meltdown of how exhausted I was I realized that I was completely incongruent with my message, that I wasn't living mine. And it's taken me from there until now to get to a place where I am actually performing at the level that I believe is needed. And so that's a bit exciting. It's like a little pat on the back to be like, yes, it's working. You've done the work. You've done the therapy. It's paying off. But my goal 100% is to be in whatever position I can get into, but to have the influence needed for these stories, the messages, create a family of young people and people. I focus on young people because that's where the most change can happen. Who are on social media, who are out there in the world. I have a number of big roles in video games where I've got to experience, I have fans, and I have got to experience what can happen when you choose to live your way a certain way. Many of them have shifted how they live. Many of them have communicated that with me. I know a lot of celebrities. I've worked very closely with them. There is a disconnect right now in the world. They are not, and I'm once again being too bold here, maybe, but they are not doing the job right. There is no worth in turning up to an event and getting your photographs and leaving. In fact, you're doing the organization a serious disservice, because what happens is people see that you're supporting them and don't give money anymore. So if you are going to get the benefit of being told how great you are for turning up to give a plate of food, you better do the work. Right. You better follow through and give that money and give that time and give that energy and ask big questions and ask what you can do to help because of your influence and your access. And if you're not doing that, go home.
Trust is about accountability. Show up when you say you're going to show up, but show up fully. Don't just show up for a piece of it. And so I'm thrilled that you are finding I don't think you ever lost it, your boldness, right? And your voice in a new way, and the way in which you want to approach all of the ideas that you have, because there are many, or you wouldn't have started so many of these organizations or participated in so many. And the world is ripe for this right now. That's what you're telling me, and it's true. This episode is sponsored by the Intrinsic Group, my boutique management consulting firm specializing in guiding organizations to leverage talent, optimize processes, and to ensure the organization's narrative is aligned with their culture. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, please reach out to us. To see all the small but mighty organizations we featured, check out our incredible infographics in the stories section of the Intrinsic Group website. So, are you ready for my quick and gutsy questions?
I love it. How does this work?
Normally on this, because we talk about a single organization, but I want to do this as Georgia Van Cuylenburg, because you are an organization in a way, because you've touched so many things, So let's answer them that way for this podcast, I think, because it's such a different one that we're doing, because you're the do-gooder. We're highlighting you. So what is at the top of your wish list where you, Georgia, want to take this when you think of being that serial do-gooder, but it can't be money or funding?
So easy. It's a visual. I'm a visual thinker. I had an image that came to me a couple of years ago of stepping off a plane surrounded by children who knew my face because of the messages that they'd got, and they were living in their joy and you could tell that they hadn't come from that place, that wasn't where it had started for them. And it was just the biggest bear hug of so many children hugging me so hard that I could fall over or not, because together we were all joyful and happy. So that to me is the like end wish. And it's not about me, it's about the way they look, because they know how special they are. And I want to get the hugs, to be honest. Hugs are delicious.
It's great. It's great. It's a beautiful vision and it's a beautiful wish. If you were to think of a song that describes Georgia, or describes sort of your approach, maybe, what would it be?
For whatever reason, all through my childhood and as an adult, this song still resonates with me in a way that I couldn't explain as a kid. Shed a Little Light by James Taylor. When that I wrote in my 8th grade school diary, the lines, "Oh, let us turn our thoughts today to Martin Luther King to recognize that there are ties between us, all men and women living on the earth, ties of hope and love, sister and brotherhood, that we are bound together by the road that lies behind us and the path that lies ahead. We are bound and we are bound." There was something in that song that I didn't understand even then, because obviously I was, so not American and so not in the world of, I knew obviously Martin Luther King, but I didn't understand what that all meant. But Shed a Little Light, as I even think, thank you for asking, because I've never really thought about this. But that song was kind of my anthem growing up.
So what makes you gutsy?
Yeah, I will answer from a place of a little bit more vulnerability than I want to. Not going to answer with all the fun answers. My greatest fear is leaving the earth. It makes me very uncomfortable in a way that everything in me just wants to shut down and run and jump and do anything other than that idea, to the point where I have trouble sleeping, and I have all my life, because it's a form of leaving the earth. That is all driven by the fact that I am terrified that I won't make a big enough change in the world for the things that need to be changed before I go. And I can't leave because it's not changing enough. When I was very little, I heard a news report when I was in 2nd grade by accident. My parents wouldn't have let me be watching the news, but I heard it, that we had enough bombs to blow up the world 7 times over. And it built in me a fear where anytime I heard a bang as a kid, I would say, I have the feeling. And I would run into my parents, or I would cry and say, I have the feeling. And I didn't know they didn't know what the feeling was. And only a couple of years ago, my mom was like, what is the feeling? I was like, oh my gosh, you don't know? And I couldn't have talked about this until a few weeks ago when I do EMDR therapy, and it's very helpful. And we started unwinding this. And it's part of why my performing and acting is at the place it is, because I've been able to unravel my biggest fear. So I'm not afraid of being my true full self. But within that fear is still there. So when you ask me what makes me gutsy, it's the fact that I have to.
You're compelled, right? You have to be gutsy in order to have your biggest impact that you can possibly have.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you said it the way that I said it for a long time, and I really want to make it clear that for a long time I was saying it that way. For a long time I was saying, I want to have the biggest impact, and I realized that that's not what I want. What I want is the world to change. I don't mind if I'm not part of it. If young people, I'm going to cry, if millions and millions of young people changed and made that change and nobody knew why, but it was something that I'd said, great. And if it's not something I say, if there's a young person that I say something to who becomes the person that says that, and no one ever knows but me and that person, if I don't know, I don't care. Like,
you just want it to happen.
The world has to change. The world we are killing ourselves every day. We are using hate. We are using anger. We are using all the wrong things, and we are going in the wrong direction. I just, if I could do one thing, I would put a sign up. It was like, wrong way, go back. That's the thing that makes me gutsy, because I have to do what I can do in this lifetime to change it.
What is something that outsiders or even a few insiders don't know about you as a do-gooder, would you say?
Gosh, that's a very good question. I live a very public, honest, transparent life. So anybody that comes across me and has the conversation will know now this thing about me being an introvert. That was where my head went first, of like, I actually get really exhausted from being around people all the time. Nobody believes that. Like when they meet me, they're like, there's no way you're not an extrovert. But if I don't get my alone time, I'm a very upset, very fractured, very confused person, because I'm so busy taking on all the things I'm seeing and in the energy and the emotion that I need time to process it. Otherwise, I might combust.
Right. You have to replenish. It sounds like you absolutely have to replenish. And there's a school of thought about introverts. Many are in the entertainment industry. People think they're extroverts, but the truth is they understand performance and they understand a role and they understand how to get out there. But they absolutely have to have solid downtime to replenish, because it's just it can be overwhelming.
Big events, I don't like festivals, I don't like anything where I'm lost in too many people. And I think the thing that I almost like, that was like the precursor to your answer, which is that I'm very bad at it. Yeah. My biggest issue is making time for myself.
I'm wondering actually if it's a combination of the urgency to repair the world. And so if you stop for any moment to replenish, you're not doing your job. And that has to come together, because those two identities have to live together. Yeah. Right?
And it's fascinating. I'm working on it. For anyone that's listening and going, well, I think we listen through a lens of looking for perfection. And this is definitely an area I'm working on.
Hey, to me, it's a journey. It's an endless journey. I feel like I get to learn all the time, which is a pleasure. And also, I always think, oh, I wish I had known that, but hey, it's like, that's life, right? This is probably an unfair question, but my last quick and gutsy, if you could get one celebrity or influencer, and I'm going to say it this way, to join you on your quest to change the world or to create change in this world, who might it be?
That's a very, very tough one to answer. Because there's so many caveats that come, especially working in the world I work. I know the truth about a lot of people, so my answers are not what a lot of people would say. I have to think very deeply because I know too much sometimes. My immediate thought was maybe a bit self-serving. There's a few people in the world that I revere very deeply. The Dalai Lama, Dan Siegel, the neurobiologist. I've been talking to him a few times recently. It's such a pleasure to get to talk to him. People like them because of what I would learn on the journey, as well as having their belief in what we do and their understanding and wisdom. Yeah, I would want to create some super magical young person. Maybe somebody that represents as non-binary because of that lack of being seen as one thing. A person that was so loved by the world because of the love within them, and was a young person that I could partner with and just be like, let's go there together. I have a deep belief and faith in somebody that I don't know if it's unfounded. Also, I have recurring dreams about this, so I'm trusting that. I think Ryan Seacrest and I could do a lot of damage together. He does a lot of good and doesn't really tell people about it.
So how do folks reach you? How do they find you? To follow you, to connect with you, or any of the organizations that you have been part of?
So personally, on social media, it's Georgia Vanc, VANC on most things. Arts Bridging the Gap is Arts Bridge Gap on a lot of these things. My podcast is LF Nerd World.
So this is wonderful, and I encourage people to go check you out, check out your podcast, because I love the premise of it. It's so great. And it's beautiful because you're interviewing folks who have had these experiences and how they used it in a way to push through it and create some resilience. So it's quite remarkable. I just want to thank you for spending so much time with me. I not only learned a bit about the organizations that you support, particularly the arts, but more your philosophy and your approach to helping young people see themselves differently and with as full potential as they are able, and to continue on that path to do that, which I believe ultimately will change our world.
Laura, thank you. You are somebody who's doing the little you can, right? Like we all have the little we can do. And it is such a pleasure to connect with you, to call you a new friend. And
Absolutely.
I look forward to supporting and listening as you move forward. And thank you for allowing me to see some things in my world a bit differently today as well. Because I think every time we talk, we should hear ourselves.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, give us some stars, and write a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're interested in sponsoring a small and gutsy episode to keep it going, please reach out to me or buy us a coffee at www.buymeacoffee.com/small-and-gutsy. Just an FYI, for those of you who might want to be a small and gutsy patron, we just released our Patreon site with some really fun first edition small and gutsy merchandise. So check us out to support this effort at patreon.com/small-and-gutsy. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, meaning we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, the volunteers, my co-producer, sound engineer, and composer, the amazing Pavel Franson, my social media maven, Delania Tirado, my infographic creator extraordinaire, Sonia Fizek, Nate Addy for the exceptional logo, and all the friends and family who have guided and inspired me. A very special thank you to my biggest champion, without whom I could not have created this project, my very best friend and a true sounding board. Thanks, Mark Witkoff. Thanks for being there. From small and gutsy to big with impact, I'm Laura Witkoff, and thanks for listening.